For those of you who may not know what OIE is an acronym for the World Organization for Animal Health. It was established in 1924 when there was a threat of rinderpest. It's a cattle disease that was actually going to ravage Europe. So a few countries came together and formed this organization referred to OIE, Office of International Epizootics, which later acquired the name World Organization for Animal Health, but retained the acronym OIE. So established in 1924, we now have 182 member countries as of now, and each country has a delegate that is represented in our General Assembly. These delegates are the people who actually make decisions on how OIE operates. We have the mandate to improve animal health, animal welfare, and public health and protection worldwide. St. Lucia is the latest country to join the OIE. That makes it 182 countries. And as I told you, each country has a delegate, and each delegate has one vote, irrespective of the size of the country. We have a website there, which you can go and have a look on later. Now, I'll go to the OIE and the animal welfare. The animal welfare became a strategic priority for the OIE as early as 2002 because of its historic role in protecting animal health, but also we know that animal health is a key component of animal welfare. And lastly, because the mandate that was given to us by the member countries through a resolution that was passed during the 70th OIE General Assembly in 2002 to ask OIE to take a lead internationally on animal welfare. The objective of the animal welfare for OIE is to contribute to the improved animal welfare globally through the development of standards that are science-based, and to support and give technical advice to the member countries to help them implement the standards. Just to tell you, the standards are actually the tools I'm going to talk about. I want to show you how the OIE process is for setting the standards. Unfortunately, I don't have a pointer, but if you look on your extreme left, there's a yellow circle. A delegate, that means a country representative to the OIE, or anybody else from international organizations, or even from a meeting like this, can come up with an issue, a topic that needs to be addressed. Once sent to the OIE, the Director General sends it to the Specialist Commission, the circle in green, the first circle in green. The Specialist Commission will review the issue that has been brought and send it to the global experts, and they'll do a draft. And this draft will be sent back to the Specialist Committee, which is then sent to the delegates for comments. The delegates, as I told you, are the country representatives, and these are usually the directors of veterinary services or their representatives. They will look at that, make their comments, and send it back to the Specialist Commission, who will then take it to the General Assembly for adoption. Now, if it's not adopted, it's taken back to the specialists for review, and once adopted, it becomes an international standard. And we have got two types of standards. We've got the terrestrial and the aquatic standards, which are called the codes, and we've got the diagnostic standards, which are called the manuals. And once it becomes a standard, it is published on the OIE website. I hope you'll be able to get this presentation, and you can click at that website down there, and you'll see a video on actually how this is done. So I'll go straight away to the chapter 7, part 7 of the stray dog population control, which is now a standard that gives us the tools for management of stray dog population. Now, I'll give you the background on how that particular standard was developed. In May 2006, the OIE recognized the importance of providing guidance to its members on methods of humane dog population control. So they decided to develop a specific standard with this regard. And in 2009, during the 77th General Session, Chapter 7.7 that I'm just now talking about on stray dog population control was unanimously adopted and was included in the Terrestrial Animal Health Code. That picture there, people there just shows you in the General Assembly how they sit and vote by raising up their cards, one count, one vote. If they say, if there's dissent, you dissent, but then the majority takes the decision. So why did we develop this chapter? Why? We realize very many people die from rabies each year, and many of them are children. The figure will have 50,000, 60,000, it's probably even more. As Dr. Kairi told you there, in countries like Kenya and many others, where that is most prevalent, there's hardly any good record to tell you what's happening. So these figures are just an estimate. They could be really much more. We know that 99%, and he talked of it, of dog bites to humans end up in death. And we also know that many dogs or many animals that contract rabies also die from the disease each year. And we know that stray dogs pose serious health, socioeconomic, and animal welfare problems in many of these countries. And for these reasons, the OIE actually developed the standard that I'm going to talk to you about. I'll just give you links which you can go to when you get the presentation to show you the process, actually the events that led to the development of this standard. We had first this resolution number 30 of the 77th General Session in Paris in May 2009. We had an annex to the OIE Terrestrial Animal Health Standards Commission of 2009. You can read what they said. You have an appendix to the draft guidelines on dog population control of the Terrestrial Animal Health Commission of March 2007. And we have the report of the 5th meeting of the OIE Working Group on Animal Welfare in Paris 2006. Now, the standard itself, the chapter, starts with a preamble. And the preamble says, stray and feral dogs, they pose a serious human health and health welfare problems and have a socioeconomic, environmental, political, and even sometimes religious impact in many countries. It also tells us, the preamble also tells us that human health, including prevention of zoonotic diseases, especially rabies, is a priority in the control of stray dogs. And that dog population management is an integral part of the rabies control program. You can have resources to actually refer to when you read this slide later, but I would encourage you to go to the OIE rabies portal, which is also given there to give you more information. The preamble also recognizes the importance of controlling dog populations without causing unnecessary animal suffering. It also recognizes that veterinary services should play the leading role in actually preventing zoonotic diseases and in controlling dog population. They should do the coordination in liaison with other competent public institutions. So when the standard was being developed, there were guiding principles that we should promote responsible dog ownership. And we know that dog ecology is linked with human activities. And control of dog population has to be accompanied by changes in human behavior. Those three were the guiding principles in developing this standard, which are the tools that we work with. But then you need to develop a program to be able to control the stray dogs. We know that improved health and welfare of owned dogs is one of the objectives, not just owned, but also stray dogs, their welfare. Reduce the numbers of stray dogs to an acceptable level. When you get this presentation and you click on the blue part, it takes you to the terrestrial code definition of what a stray dog is. That is the OI definition. It may vary from others. So when you get it and you see the blue parts, just click on it and it'll tell you what it is. The objectives should be to promote responsible ownership, creation and maintenance of rabies-free dog population, reduce risk of zoonotic diseases other than rabies, and the risk of parasites to humans, prevent harm to the environment and biodiversity. Like, for example, you have seen dogs, packs of dogs hunting wildlife or even livestock or even mauling children. You want to prevent that kind of thing. And then you want to prevent illegal trade, that's trafficking in dogs. So these are some of the objectives, the main objectives. Now, the chapter identifies competences that should be involved in the responsible dog population control programs. And the veterinary authority is one of them. You'll have other government agencies depending on which country you come from. You'll have private sector involvement, veterinarians, non-governmental organizations, local governments, the municipalities, for example, and then, of course, the dog owners themselves. So these are the institutions that you should certainly include in the dog population control programs. Now, once you have the idea of controlling dogs and you want to have a program, the standard tells us you should have an advisory group. And this advisory group will be composed of veterinarians, experts in all manner of dogs, ecology, behavior, and zoonotic diseases, and representatives from relevant stakeholders like the ones I've just told you. The role of the advisory group will be to identify the sources of the stray dogs, to estimate the existing number, distribution, and ecology, to look at the regulatory framework within the country that supports the control of dogs, and also look at the resources available to the authorities. If I may just tell you, identifying stray dogs, these could be owned dogs that roam freely. So the advisory group should be able to identify this, or there could be dogs that have been abandoned by their owner, including puppies that are resulting from uncontrolled breeding of owned dogs, or there could be unowned dogs that reproduce successfully. So the advisory group should be able to identify all this. It's just like when you have a leaking tap in the house and there's water running. You cannot control the water running until you identify where the water is really coming. So you go and switch off that tap and there'll be no water running. This is exactly what the advisory group should do, identify the sources. Then they should estimate the existing numbers and distribution and ecology. There are tools that they could use, and they could use registers of dogs if they exist, population estimates where they have been done, surveys of dogs, owners, shelters, and veterinarians. I'm giving you this as what is in the standard. This is what is recommended. I know many countries don't have this. Yeah? So I know you will be asking me, oh, we don't have registers, dog registers. Yes, but we are recommending it would be a good idea to have dog registers. It should have the important factors relevant to the dog carrying capacity and the environment should be included. It should be one of the issues that you'll use in estimating numbers and distribution. And then, regulatory framework. They should look at registration and identification of dogs where it exists. They should look at the vaccination, the regulation on vaccination against rabies and try and improve it if it's weak. Veterinary procedures that can be used for some of the interventions that we shall be talking about. Is there legislation that supports those procedures? Is there a legislation that supports control of dog movement? Is there legislation that supports environmental control, regulation of dog shelters? Is there a regulation on animal welfare obligations of owners and authorities? Then they look at the resources available, and this could be human resources, financial, technical, infrastructure, all those that I've listed there. So these are the things that the advisory group will be looking at as you develop the program. The message I'm giving you here, that you need a strong modern legal framework as a cornerstone to successful stray dog control program. And you can have some of that information from chapter 4, 3.4 of the Terrestrial Code, and you can also get the legislation done at your country when you apply to the OIE to have a performance veterinary evaluation tool, PVS, that will assess how best your veterinary service is running, and you could actually engage them to do a veterinary legislation mission, and they'll identify for you the weaknesses of your legislation in terms of veterinary, in terms of stray dog control. I'll not go into the details of this, but I'm just showing you what is available. So now let's go to the control measures. You know them, so I'm just going to go over them. Education and legislation for responsible dog ownership. These must be done in collaboration with the government authorities and NGOs, veterinary authorities. KVA is here for Kenya, KVB is there, and many others. And you can have the resources to support you through by checking the chapter 7.7 of the code, and you can also visit the website of the OI to look at the campaign materials that we have. Registration and identification of dogs is the core component for the control of the dog population. If you cannot identify them, it's going to be very difficult to really know whether you're making progress or not. And therefore, again, I've given you resources there, chapter 4.1 of the code that gives you the general principles and identification and traceability of live animals and general obligations related to certification. You can also go to the website of an organization called CaroDog or UPNet, and you'll get a lot of information. You have reproductive control. This can be done surgically, chemical sterilization, chemical contraception, and separation of dogs during estrus, males from females. This is another tool that can be used. Removal and handling. The competent authorities should capture, collect, and transport dogs in a humane way. And this following a relevant legislative procedure in the country. And that's why I keep on going to say that a strong legislation is very important. So you don't want to do things in a way that is not humane. And the legislation will actually give you how to do it. Capture and return of the roaming and rehoming and release. This may not be acceptable in some communities. I know communities who will not take a dog that they know has been captured from elsewhere and they're given. So again, these are standards recommended. It may not work in your community, but it works in others. Environmental controls should exclude food sources, rubbish dumps where dogs get feed. Try and install animal-proof rubbish containers. International dog control movement. Again, we have the chapter 8.14, the Terrestrial Animal Code, that provides recommendations on what to do with respect to rabies vaccination. And then there's a model certificate of what it should look like once the dog has been vaccinated and is due for international movement. Again, you can also refer to European Union legislation, number 1 of 2005, with regard to international movement of dogs. You can also control them within the country. And here is where you should invoke movement control regulation for public safety and rabies control. And again, here you have to use the legislation. Your legislation should be able to allow you to invoke the control of local animal movement. You can use leash laws, roaming instructions, like in town. The dogs may not be allowed to walk without a leash. And these are tools that you can use. Then you can also regulation of dog dealers. There are people who do commercial dog production. You encourage the dealers to form joint appropriate associations that respect the rule and legislation that will reduce abandonment of dogs. So if you've got kennels, breeders, you should actually encourage them to form associations that will actually protect that will use the legislation that will reduce the abandonment of dogs. There's a study that has been done in Europe, and it's on that website there. You can also have a look at it later. Dog bite incidents, reducing them. the most effective means is education if you want to reduce dog bites. And you can actually exploit various means. You can use legal mechanisms to enable the competent authorities to impose penalties or otherwise deal with irresponsible owners. So again, you have to have a legislation. I know in Kenya here, if a dog bites you, if somebody's dog bites you, can actually take them to court. And then you sort your issues there. Use of mandatory registration and identification could be another one, so that you should be able to actually identify which dog it was. And of course, the owners, once they know their dogs are registered, will tend to be more careful rather than leaving them to go around biting people. You can use public education again, as that is focused on appropriate dog-directed behavior. The last one is euthanasia, which everybody gets very excited about. And there are many resources there. I'm not going to it because I'm not an expert in euthanasia, but you go to the Territorial Animal Code, it gives you so many options, the advantages and disadvantages. But you can also get the ICAM guidelines, AVM guidelines, WAP guidelines, our Territorial Code. They'll give you they'll give you advice or guidelines on how euthanasia should be done. But irrespective of which way you do it, okay, it cannot control the stray dogs alone, on its own, it cannot. It should be done in liaison with the principle, it should be done following the principles of Terrestrial Animal Health Code, with emphasis to using the most practical and rapid humane methods, minimizing distress, anxiety, and pain. And should be done in combination with many of those methods that I've listed for you above. So the chapter also has a section on evaluation of the control programs. And the reason is you want to improve performance as you control. You want to also demonstrate that the programs are achieving its aims. You want to compare different strategies so that you'll be able to achieve your objective. You'll have indicators for your evaluation, and these will be dog population sizes and their related subpopulations, dog welfare, the prevalence of zoonotic diseases, people's attitudes and behavior. These are some of the indicators. They're not all, but these are some of the indicators that you can use while doing evaluation. The sources for information for evaluation could be the surveys, if they exist in your country. You could use questionnaires, focus group discussions, expert opinions. You can do direct observations, and if there are records, you can also use them. This is just an OI self-assessment tool that has been developed. Unfortunately, you can't read, but there are 6 issues to raise here. But in brief, if you go to the website, you'll be able to get it. It gives you questions which you answer, and at the end of the day, you know whether you'll be able to assess yourself and see if you are doing progress or not. The specific rabies section was added to this tool in 2015, and there's potential for actually improving it. Now, as I told you, there are also other sources where you can get information on guiding, on monitoring and evaluation of dog population and management interventions. They are from ICAM, World Animal Protection, and there are many more. I just picked this because I knew they would be here. So what are we doing at the OIE? I've given you the tools that are available. I'm just going to highlight for you some of the activities that we are doing. Development of animal welfare standards, okay? I've already told you we are doing that. Right now, what we are doing, we are now reviewing this chapter 7.7, okay? In November this year, the ad hoc group will sit and review that chapter. And the objective will be to update this chapter with the new areas of research that are inadequately addressed in the current version. Then they review the terminologies used in the chapter, but mostly important, they want to align this chapter to the global strategic plan to end human rabies from dog-mediated rabies. Okay? So once this is done, it's going, you remember the cycles I showed you there? Yeah, it will go through those cycles and then come to General Assembly, and then the delegates will vote, one man, one country, one person, one country, one vote. If they accept it, it passes. If they reject it, it doesn't go through. It goes back for review. So that's at least one thing we are doing. Capacity building, we have national animal welfare focal point training seminars about animal welfare, but also on dog population, stray dog population management. And we are using resources from our collaborating centers listed there in Australia, Mexico, Italy, Sweden, and USA. We draw people from those to actually help provide information during the workshops. We are also implementing the cooperation agreements we have with so many of those institutions that you have seen there. In terms, for example, the IATA, how do you carry material on the plane? Yeah? Wild animal protection, we are working with them in various ways. So we review and implement our cooperation agreements with regard to animal welfare, which dog population control is one of them. We have got awareness activities. Again, you can go to the website there. There are materials there that you can have a look at and support you in terms of controlling rabies and also controlling stray dog populations. Now, what is OI doing really on the ground? I'll give you an example in Europe. There is an OI animal welfare platform for Europe for stray dog population management initiatives. And in this one, they've got developed roadmaps for the regional workshops on self-assessment and monitoring. They are doing awareness campaigns. They've got an electronic depository for best practices where countries can deposit information and people can actually access. And of course, the seminars for the focal points. I'll give you examples. There's a roadmap for the Balkan countries. I hope the map is clear. Those are the Balkan countries. They want to become compliant with the OI standards for dog population control by 2025. And I've listed for you the countries. There are Albania, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Croatia, Macedonia, FYR, Greece, Kosovo, Montenegro, Romania, Serbia, and Turkey. We have got also, they have already had 3 meetings, and those are just a selection of pictures of the meetings, the workshops on stray dog population management in the Balkans. We have also West Eurasia. They want to be compliant to the OI standard by 2030. The Balkans 2025, these ones want 2030. So they are having a roadmap on getting to that particular destination. And we are having Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and all the stands. Okay? Again, it's just the training of the stray dog population meetings that have been held there with the support of the OI. So, in brief, in the Balkans are 11 countries that are following the roadmap. In West Eurasia, there are 8 countries, and there's proposal to do it also for Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and also Middle East. Beside this, we have some activities of an awareness and campaign beyond Europe. When I talk beyond Europe, I'm talking beyond France, and this is mainly in the French-speaking countries where similar activities are being undertaken. Maybe not to the same level as what's happening in the Balkans and Eurasia countries. I thank you for your attention.